If you think Jesus has done some really amazing things, it was his last days that were some of the most powerful ever. You see, in these last days, Jesus came back to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. And when he came into town, he came riding on a donkey, as had been foretold by prophets in the past. He came as a king, though not on a mighty war stallion. And yet people gathered. People who had been touched by him, people who had been moved by him, people who felt seen for the first time in their lives, who felt close to God, who felt hope for the first time in their lives, and they celebrated Jesus. Now, there were still some people who felt threatened by Jesus and they didn't celebrate. They plotted in back corners and alleys. On Thursday of that week, Jesus gathered with the disciples in an upper room of a house. It was like the Airbnbs of the day where people would rent out space in their house, and all these travelers coming to Jerusalem for Passover would get together in these spaces. And everybody was there, including Judas. And while they were celebrating, while they were at the table, Jesus took bread. Not a totally uncommon thing, but he took bread and he broke it and he gave it to his disciples. And this is what he said: "Take and eat. This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And then after supper, he took the cup. When he'd blessed it, he gave it for all to drink, saying, "This cup is the new covenant, the new promise in my blood that's shed for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin." Don't ever forget these things. Jesus that night gave himself. That meal was just the beginning of Jesus saying that I am yours. All that I am is yours. It's the same thing that God did from the very beginning of creation, making space for people and God giving the divine self to humanity, no matter the cost. Now, when all the meal was over, but they were still at the table, Jesus unexpectedly got up and he took off his outer robe and he tied a towel around himself. He went over and filled a basin full of water, and then he did the most unexpected of things. He knelt down by their feet, and Jesus began to wash off the grime. Now, if you've never really thought about it before, in these days, people walked on dirt roads, and animals were the main means of transporting goods, and so those roads were dirty, and their sandals did not provide a lot of protection. Jesus stooped down and did this work. When he got to Peter, Peter said, "Oh, Lord, I'm not letting you wash my feet. That is beneath you. That is a servant's job." And Jesus said, "Yes, it is." And Jesus says, "Peter, I need you to open yourself up to me. Let me be close to you and be a part of what I am doing." And so Peter says, "Well, fine, Jesus, but then wash all of me." And Jesus says, "No, Peter, this is enough. This is what you need." And Jesus went around to all 12 of the disciples at that table and washed their feet. And when he was done, he took off that soaking wet and dirty towel, put his robe back on, and sat back down. And looked around the table, in the eyes of all the people who were gathered there. And he said, "You call me rabbi, your teacher, and you call me Lord, and that is what I am. But if your rabbi and Lord washes your feet, you should wash the feet of one another. I have set you an example And Jesus, I think, was talking not just about washing feet. He was talking about serving people. He was talking about loving people. He was talking about everything that Jesus had done was an example of God's will for humanity. And then Jesus said, if you do these things, you will be blessed. And shortly after this, Jesus gave them a new commandment. And it's such a monumental thing that sometimes we even use the Latin word for commandment, which is mandatum, which in English we say Maundy when we talk about this Thursday event. And Jesus says this commandment. He says, just as I have loved you, love one another. Everyone is going to know that you belong to me when you love one another. And Jesus taught them a few other things, got them ready for that time when he knew that he would no longer be with them. And when he was done, they got up and they left that house and they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed for them, where Jesus prayed for us, and he waited for his arrest.